Welcome to His Stories, the place where real men's truths finally get told. If you're new here, you're in good company. We don't sugarcoat, we don't make excuses, and we sure don't apologize for speaking our truth. Today's story is about a man who learned that sometimes the house you build with your own hands can become the prison that breaks your heart. This one's going to shake you, brothers. Let's dive in. My grandfather used to say, son, you can build a house with your hands, but you build a home with your heart. And sometimes, boy, sometimes you find out which one you really got. I thought I understood what he meant until I was standing on the sidewalk in front of the house I'd paid for with 20 years of sweat, holding a garbage bag with everything I was allowed to take, watching my wife change the locks on the only home I'd ever known. Turns out there's a difference between owning a house and owning a home. And when you get sick, you find out real quick which one you really had. Picture this. You're 65 years old, standing on the sidewalk in the rain, holding two garbage bags and watching a locksmith change the locks on the house you've been paying the mortgage on for 20 years. 20 years of never missing a payment. 20 years of overtime shifts and side jobs. 20 years of believing that the woman you loved was building a life with you, not just waiting for the right moment to throw you away. The diagnosis came 3 months ago. Prostate cancer, stage 3. Not a death sentence, the doctor said, but treatment would be rough. Chemo, radiation, surgery. I'd need help, support, someone to drive me to appointments and hold my hand when the pain got too bad. What I got instead was divorce papers served to me in my hospital bed. My name is Brad Prince, and I'm 70 years old now. For 2 decades, I poured every dollar I made into making a home for me and my wife, Rita. I worked double shifts at the steel mill, took on weekend construction jobs, never took a vacation I couldn't afford. I painted that house 3 times, fixed every leaky faucet, installed every light fixture with these same hands that are shaking as I tell you this story. But here's the thing about getting sick when you're older, brothers. It shows you who really loves you and who is just loving what you could provide. Rita looked at my cancer diagnosis and saw an inconvenience, saw medical bills and caregiving, and a man who couldn't work overtime anymore. So she decided to cut her losses. What she didn't count on was me fighting back. What she didn't expect was that a sick old man still had some fight left in him. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see where our brotherhood stretches. Because this story isn't just about a house or a marriage. It's about what happens when you discover that everything you thought was solid was built on sand. And what you do when you find out you're stronger than you ever knew you could be. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you can't understand the man without understanding where he came from. Birmingham, Alabama, 1954. I was born into a world where a black man's options were limited, but his determination didn't have to be. My daddy, James Prince, worked at the Sloss furnaces for 32 years, coming home every night with soot under his fingernails and pride in his shoulders. Mama, Sarah Prince, took in washing and ironing for white families in Mountain Brook, her hands raw from lye soap, but her back straight with dignity. We lived in a little shotgun house in Ensley where the air always smelled like iron and coal dust, and the sound of the foundries was the rhythm of our lives. Boy, Daddy would tell me while we sat on the front porch after supper, watching the sun set over the foundry smokestacks. You remember this? A man ain't measured by what he starts with. He's measured by what he builds with what he's got. And you always take care of your own. We were poor, but we were proud. Mama kept that little house spotless, with doilies on every surface and the smell of cornbread and collard greens floating from the kitchen every Sunday. She had this way of making something from nothing, turning scraps into quilts, penny candy into birthday celebrations, hand-me-down clothes into Sunday best. Baby, she'd say, pressing my school clothes with an iron heated on the stove. It don't matter if your shoes got holes long as your character don't. You walk tall, speak proper, and treat folks with respect, but you never, ever let nobody treat you like you don't matter. I was the oldest of 4 children, me, then my sister Diane, then the twins, Robert and Ronald. We shared beds, shared clothes, shared dreams of something better than the foundry life that seemed to be the only option for boys who looked like us. But Daddy had bigger plans. Every Friday night, he'd sit at the kitchen table with a pencil and a worn notebook, figuring out how to stretch his foundry paycheck to cover not just survival, but hope. He'd save $1 here, 50 cents there, building what he called his tomorrow fund. This money, he'd say, showing us the coffee can where he kept his savings. This money gonna buy y'all something I never had. Choices, education, training, whatever it takes to make sure y'all don't have to breathe this foundry air the rest of your lives. By the time I graduated high school in 1972, Birmingham was changing. Civil rights had opened doors that had been locked tight when I was born. But Daddy was getting older, his lungs getting weaker from 18 years of foundry dust. And the family needed money more than I needed college. I got a job at the Fairfield Works steel mill, following in Daddy's footsteps, but hoping it wouldn't be forever. The work was hard. 12-hour shifts in heat that could kill you if you weren't careful, lifting and hauling and breathing air thick with particulates that would probably take years off my life. But the money was good, better than anything else available to an 18-year-old black man in Alabama. I could help Mama with the household expenses, help Diane pay for secretarial school, and still have enough left over to start my own tomorrow fund. The mill was its own world, a place where men of all colors worked side by side because the steel didn't care about the color of the hands that shaped it. My supervisor was a white man named Bill Henderson, who'd been working steel since before I was born. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. Prince, he told me during my 3rd month on the job, you got good hands and a better head. You keep showing up like you've been doing, and I'll make sure you learn every part of this operation. Steel work don't have to be all you do, but while you're here, you might as well be the best at it. I took his advice to heart. Learn to read the furnace temperatures by the color of the flames. Learn to judge the quality of steel by the sound it made when you struck it. Learn that honest work done well was its own kind of dignity. But it was lonely work. Long shifts and physical exhaustion didn't leave much energy for socializing. Most of the guys my age were married already, starting families, building the lives that steel mill paychecks could support if you were careful with your money. That's when I met Rita Washington at a church social in 1974. Mount Olive Baptist was having their annual spring fish fry, and I'd gone because Mama insisted that a young man needed community, not just work. Rita was serving sweet tea from a pitcher that looked tiny in her small hands, laughing at something one of the church ladies had said. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women have. Skin like polished wood, eyes that seemed to see everything, a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When she handed me my plate of fish and hush puppies, our fingers touched for just a second, and I felt something I'd never felt before. "You're James and Sarah's boy, aren't you?" she said, her voice soft but confident. "I heard you working over at Fairfield now." "Yes, ma'am, Brad Prince, and you're Rita Washington. My folks got the grocery store over on Avenue F." I knew the store, Washington's Market, where Mama sometimes sent me to buy flour or sugar when we were running low. It was one of the few black-owned businesses in the neighborhood, and the Washingtons were respected, prosperous in ways that steel mill families could only aspire to. "Well, Miss Washington, this fish is about the best I ever tasted." "That's because I caught it myself," she said with a grin that let me know she was teasing. "Drove all the way down to the Black Warrior River yesterday morning with my fishing pole and my determination." We talked for 20 minutes that day, standing beside the serving table, while the smell of fried fish and the sound of gospel music created the perfect backdrop for what felt like the beginning of something important. She was smart, funny, ambitious in ways that made me want to be better than I was. "What you plan to do with your life, Brad Prince?" she asked as the evening wound down. Right now, I'm just trying to take care of my family and save enough money to maybe start my own business someday. What about you? I've gone to nursing school in the fall. Always wanted to help people, and nursing seems like a good way to do that while making decent money. Nursing school. That meant she had plans, goals, a vision for her future that went beyond just getting married and having babies. It meant she was the kind of woman worth working for, worth building something with. That night, walking home through the familiar streets of Ensley, I made a decision that would shape the next 40 years of my life. I was going to court Rita Washington. I was going to convince her that a steel mill worker with callous hands and big dreams was worth her time. I was going to build the kind of life that would make her proud to be Mrs. Brad Prince. Looking back now, I can see that I fell in love with the idea of her before I really knew who she was. Fell in love with her ambition, her beauty, her family's respectability. I thought if I could win her love, I'd have won something precious, something that would validate all the hard work and sacrifice. I was right about one thing. Rita Washington was precious, but I was wrong about almost everything else. The courtship took 2 years, and they were the best 2 years of my young life. Rita was in nursing school, studying hard and working part-time at her family's store, but she made time for me in ways that made me feel like the luckiest man in Birmingham. Saturday evenings became our time. I'd pick her up in my 1968 Chevy Nova, not the fanciest car, but I kept it clean and running smooth, and we'd drive to places where young folks could be together without spending money we didn't have. Rickwood Field for baseball games, the park by the river for picnics, downtown to window shop and dream about the things we'd buy when we had real money. "What kind of house you want someday?" I asked her one evening as we sat on a blanket by the Black Warrior River, watching the sun set over the water. "Something that's mine," she said without hesitation, "not renting from somebody who can put me out whenever they feel like it. A house with my name on the deed, where I can paint the walls any color I want and plant flowers in my own yard." "How many bedrooms?" "At least 3, one for us, one for guests, and one for my sewing room. I want to make all my own curtains and bedspreads, make everything exactly how I picture it." I loved listening to her talk about our future like it was already decided, like she'd already chosen me to be the man who would make her dreams come true. The way she said us made my chest tight with something between hope and determination. "What about you?" she asked, leaning against my shoulder. "What you dreaming about?" "I'm dreaming about building whatever you want, a house where you feel safe and happy, where our kids can run around in the backyard, where we can have Sunday dinners with the whole family. I want to give you everything your heart desires, Rita. You don't have to give me everything, Brad. Just be the kind of man I can count on. Be steady, be honest, be there when I need you." Looking back, I think that was the moment I should have paid more attention to what she was really saying. She wasn't asking for romantic gestures or passionate declarations. She was asking for security, stability, predictability. She was asking for a man who would provide for her, not necessarily a man who would sweep her off her feet. But I was 20 years old and in love, and I heard what I wanted to hear. We got married in the spring of 1976 at Mount Olive Baptist, the same church where we'd met. Rita looked like an angel in her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. I stood at the altar in a rented tuxedo, trying not to cry as she walked down the aisle toward me. "Do you, Bradford James Prince, take Rita Louise Washington to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," I said, meaning every word with every fiber of my being. The early years were everything I dreamed they would be. We rented a small apartment near downtown, nothing fancy but clean and safe. Rita finished nursing school and got a job at University Hospital, working the day shift in the pediatric ward. I kept my job at the steel mill, picking up overtime whenever it was available. Every Friday night, we'd sit at our little kitchen table and plan our future. Rita would spread out house listings from the newspaper, circling the ones that caught her eye. I'd calculate our savings, figure out what we could afford for a down payment, dream about the day we could stop paying rent and start building equity. Look at this one, she'd say, pointing to a picture of a brick ranch house in a neighborhood called Woodland Park. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, carport, and a big backyard. They're asking $18,000. We got about $3,000 saved up, I tell her, doing the math in my head. If we can get an FHA loan, we might be able to swing it. How long you think it would take to save up enough for the down payment? Maybe another year, if we keep living like we've been living, no eating out, no new clothes unless we absolutely need them, no vacations. You live with that, she'd say, leaning over to kiss my cheek. Long as I know we're working towards something. Those Friday night planning sessions were like church services for our marriage. We'd sit there with our hopes spread out on the table between us, believing that hard work and sacrifice would eventually pay off in the form of the American dream. In 1977, we found the house that would define the next 20 years of our lives. A 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom brick ranch in a quiet neighborhood called Pine Valley, about 20 minutes from both our jobs. The yard was overgrown, the kitchen needed updating, and the carpet had seen better days, but it had good bones and a price we could afford. $19,500. It's perfect, Rita said as we walked through the empty rooms, her voice echoing off the bare walls. I can already see how I want to decorate each room. You sure? The kitchen's gonna need a lot of work, and that back bedroom's got some water damage. Nothing we can't fix together, she said, taking my hand. This is it, Brad. This is our home. We made an offer that same day, and when it was accepted, I felt like I just won the lottery. This house would be ours, not rented, not borrowed, but owned. Free and clear once we paid off the mortgage. It would be the place where we'd raise our children, where we'd grow old together, where we'd build the kind of life my parents had always dreamed about but never had the opportunity to create. The mortgage payment was $247, 0 cents a month for 30 years. I did the math over and over again, making sure we could handle it even if one of us lost our job temporarily. Rita's nursing salary was steady, and still work was reliable as long as you showed up and did your job. We could do this. We could build something lasting. Moving day was like a celebration. Both our families came to help us carry our modest belongings into our new home. Mama cried when she saw the kitchen, bigger than any kitchen she had ever had. Daddy walked through every room, checking the windows and testing the faucets, nodding his approval. Y'all done good, he told me as we stood in the backyard, looking at the house that was now mine. This here's the kind of place where you can build a real life. Rita threw herself into making that house a home with an energy and passion that amazed me. She sewed curtains for every window, choosing fabrics that matched her vision for each room. She planted flowers in the front yard, vegetables in the back. She painted and decorated and organized until every corner reflected her taste and personality. I worked on the structure, fixing the plumbing, updating the electrical, refinishing the hardwood floors that had been hidden under old carpet. Every weekend was a new project, a new improvement, a new way to add value and beauty to our home. The best part was doing it together. Rita would hand me tools while I installed new light fixtures. I'd hold fabric while she measured for curtains. We'd stand back and admire our work, arms around each other, proud of what we were building together. 29 years and 11 months to go, Rita would say each month when we made the mortgage payment, marking it off on the calendar she kept by the kitchen phone. 29 years and 10 months, I'd respond the next month, continuing our little ritual. We had a rhythm, a partnership, a shared vision that made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. I worked overtime to pay for Rita's decorating project. She worked extra shifts to help pay down the principal faster. We were a team building something beautiful together. For the first 10 years, it felt like we were living in a fairy tale. Rita got promoted to charge nurse. I became a shift supervisor at the mill. Our house appreciated in value as the neighborhood improved around us. We had dinner parties for other young couples, hosted Thanksgiving for both our families, created traditions that made our house feel like the center of our universe. But somewhere around 1987, things started to change in ways I didn't recognize at the time. Rita became more focused on what we didn't have than what we did, more critical of the house she'd once loved, more distant from the man who'd worked himself nearly to death to give her everything she'd asked for. I told myself it was just a phase. Every marriage goes through rough patches. We'd invested too much in this house, this life, this partnership, to let temporary problems destroy what we'd built. I was wrong about that too. Looking back, I can see the signs were there long before I got sick. Long before the divorce papers. Long before I found myself standing on the sidewalk with garbage bags. But you know how it is when you love someone. You explain away the changes, make excuses for behavior that should have had you asking harder questions. It started sometime around 1987, our 10th year in the house. Rita began making comments about the neighborhood, about our neighbors, about the house itself, that felt different from her earlier contentment. The Johnsons next door are letting their yard go to hell, she'd say, looking out the kitchen window while she fixed our morning coffee. Property values are going to drop if people don't take better care of their places. The yard looks fine to me, baby. Maybe Mr. Johnson's arthritis is acting up again. It's not about his arthritis, Brad. It's about pride. It's about caring enough to maintain what you've got. But these little criticisms became more frequent, more pointed. The house was too small. The neighborhood was getting run down. The neighbors were too loud, too careless, too something. Maybe we should think about moving somewhere nicer, she said one evening while we were watching TV in the living room I just repainted for the third time. Move? Rita, we got 17 years left on this mortgage. This house is our investment, our future. Why would we want to start over somewhere else? Because I want something better. Is that so wrong? I want a house in a better neighborhood, with better neighbors, with more space and newer appliances. Better how? This house has everything we need. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, nice yard, good schools nearby for when we have kids. When we have kids? Her voice got sharp in a way I wasn't used to hearing. Brad, I'm 29 years old. If we were going to have kids, don't you think it would have happened by now? That conversation hit me like a punch to the gut. We'd been trying to have children for years, but Rita had never talked about it like it was a failure, like something was wrong with our marriage, because we didn't have kids yet. We can keep trying, baby, or we can look into adoption, or I don't want to keep trying. I want to focus on other things, like getting out of this neighborhood before it gets worse. The other things Rita wanted to focus on became a constant source of tension between us. She wanted a bigger house in a whiter neighborhood. She wanted newer cars, nicer clothes, vacations to places I'd never heard of. She started subscribing to magazines about interior decorating and luxury lifestyles, studying them like textbooks. Look at this kitchen, she'd say, showing me pictures of granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. This is what a real kitchen looks like. Our kitchen works fine. You said you loved it when we moved in. That was 11 years ago, Brad. People change. They want better things. People change. Looking back, that might have been the most honest thing Rita ever said to me, because she was changing, becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who looked at the life we'd built together and saw only limitations instead of accomplishments. I started working more overtime, taking on weekend jobs, trying to earn enough money to give Rita the better things she wanted. I painted houses on Saturdays, did yard work for elderly neighbors on Sundays, anything to bring in extra income that might make her happy again. But it was never enough. Every improvement I made to our house was met with comments about how much better it would be if we could afford to do it right. Every extra dollar I earned was spent on upgrades that satisfied her for maybe a month before she found something else that needed changing. The living room carpet is looking tight, she'd say. We need hardwood floors like the pictures in this magazine. The bathroom vanity is too small. We need something with more storage and better lighting. The kitchen appliances are outdated. We need a complete renovation if we want this house to show well when we sell it. Sell it? When did selling our house become part of the plan? Really, we've been talking about paying this house off early so we can really start building wealth. Why would we want to sell it now? Because this neighborhood is never going to be what I want it to be. The house is never going to be big enough or nice enough. I want something that reflects who we really are. Who we really are? What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm tired of living like we're poor when we're not. It means I want a house I can be proud to invite people to instead of making excuses for why the kitchen's so small or why the neighbors play their music too loud. These conversations became more frequent and more bitter. Rita would show me house listings for places we couldn't afford, in neighborhoods where we'd be the only black family, with mortgage payments that would require both of us to work extra shifts just to survive. We can't afford this, baby. This house costs 3 times what ours is worth. We can't afford it with your current job, but if you went back to school, got some training, moved into management or something, management, right? Rita had developed this idea that I was limiting our potential by staying in the same job, the same steady, reliable job that had paid for our house and lifestyle for 15 years. I like my job. It pays well. I'm good at it. And I got seniority. Why would I want to start over doing something else? Because steelwork is a dead end, because you're never going to make the kind of money we need to really get ahead, because I want more than this, more than this, more than the house we dreamed about, saved for, sacrificed for, more than the life we built together with our own hands and our own sweat. My brother Robert noticed the tension when he came for Sunday dinner one week in 1995. Brad, what's going on with you and Rita? She barely spoke to me and she spent the whole meal complaining about the house. Just going through a rough patch, I said, not wanting to admit how bad things had gotten. She wants to upgrade some things, maybe move to a better neighborhood. Better than this? Man, this is a nice house in a nice neighborhood. Y'all got it made here. That's what I keep telling her. Who's the last time she said something positive about anything? About the house, about your job, about your marriage? I couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, Rita had stopped being grateful for what we had and started being resentful about what we didn't have. The breaking point should have been when she started talking about other men's houses, other men's jobs, other men's ability to provide the lifestyle she wanted. Denise's husband just got promoted to regional manager. They're buying a house in Mountain Brook. Sharon's husband started his own business. They're driving a BMW now. Patrice's husband went back to school and became an accountant. They took a cruise to the Caribbean last month. Other men, other marriages, other lives that were somehow better than ours because they had more money, bigger houses, newer cars. You want me to be somebody else? I asked her one night after another dinner conversation about what other people had that we didn't. I want you to want more for us. I want you to have some ambition beyond just paying the bills and maintaining the status quo. The status quo. Rita, we own our home. We got steady jobs. We're building wealth and security. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that it's not enough anymore. I want more. And I don't understand why you don't want more too. I should have asked her what more looked like. I should have asked her to define exactly what would make her happy, what would be enough to satisfy her growing dissatisfaction with our life. Instead, I kept working harder, trying to provide whatever undefined more she was looking for, hoping that eventually I'd earn enough money or make enough improvements to make her love our life together again. But you can't earn someone's contentment. You can't buy someone's gratitude. And you sure can't work hard enough to make someone appreciate what they've decided isn't good enough. I learned that lesson the hard way. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday morning in October 2019. I was 65 years old and had been having trouble urinating for months, getting up 3 or 4 times a night, feeling like I could never completely empty my bladder. Rita kept telling me it was just age, that all men go through prostate issues as they get older. You don't need to see a doctor for every little thing, she'd say when I mentioned making an appointment. You're 65 years old, Brad. Your body's not going to work like it did when you were 20. But the symptoms were getting worse, and I finally made an appointment with Dr. Anderson, despite Rita's dismissive attitude. The blood test came back with elevated PSA levels. The biopsy confirmed what we both feared, but only I seemed to accept. Mr. Prince, Dr. Anderson said, his voice gentle but direct. The results show that you have prostate cancer. It's stage 3, which means it's advanced, but still treatable. Stage 3, advanced, treatable. The words hit me like individual punches, each one landing before I could process the last one. What does that mean exactly? I asked, Rita sitting beside me in the uncomfortable silence that followed. It means the cancer has spread beyond the prostate itself, but it hasn't reached your lymph nodes or distant organs yet. We'll need to start treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, radiation, and probably surgery to remove the prostate. How long? I couldn't finish the question. With aggressive treatment, the 5-year survival rate is about 85%. But it's going to be a difficult process. You'll need a lot of support, help getting to appointments, assistance with daily activities during the worst parts of treatment. I looked at Rita, expecting to see the same fear and determination I was feeling. Instead, I saw something that chilled me more than the cancer diagnosis. Calculation. How much is all this going to cost? She asked, her first words since we'd entered the doctor's office. Your insurance should cover most of the treatment costs, but there will be some out-of-pocket expenses. More importantly, Mr. Prince will probably not be able to work during the most intensive parts of treatment. Not able to work, not able to contribute, not able to provide the more that Rita had been demanding for years. The ride home was silent. Rita stared out the passenger window while I tried to process what was happening to my life, to our life, to the future I thought we were building together. We need to talk about this, I said when we got home, sitting at the same kitchen table where we'd planned our mortgage payments and dreamed about our future. What's to talk about? You're sick, you're going to need treatment, and we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. Really, I'm going to beat this. The doctor said the survival rate is good with treatment. This is just a setback, not an ending. A setback? Brad, you're 65 years old with cancer. You're not going to be able to work. The medical bills are going to eat up our savings. This isn't a setback, it's a disaster. The word hit me like a slap. Disaster. Like my illness was something happening to her, not something we were facing together. I need you to be my partner in this, baby. I need you to help me fight this. I need to protect myself, she said, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. I need to make sure I don't go down with you. Go down with me, like I was a sinking ship instead of her husband of 43 years. The next few weeks were a nightmare of doctor appointments, treatment planning, and growing distance between me and the woman I'd spent most of my adult life loving. Rita would drive me to appointments, but wouldn't come into the exam rooms. She'd ask about treatment schedules, but only to figure out how they would affect her own plans. How many days a week is the chemotherapy? She asked after my consultation with the oncologist. 8 days a week for the first 6 weeks, then we'll reevaluate. What about the radiation? 5 days a week for 8 weeks. So you'll basically be unavailable for 3 months. Unavailable, like I was a service that was temporarily out of order. The first chemotherapy session was hell, sitting in a chair for 4 hours while poison dripped into my veins, surrounded by other cancer patients who looked as scared and sick as I felt. I'd asked Rita to come with me, to hold my hand, to be my support system. I have to work, she said. We can't afford for both of us to be taking time off. So I sat alone, watching the IV drip that was supposed to save my life, wondering when my wife had stopped being my partner and started being a woman counting the costs of being married to a sick man. The side effects hit me hard. Nausea that made it impossible to eat. Fatigue that made it hard to get out of bed, hair loss that made me look in the mirror and see a stranger. I needed help with everything, cooking, cleaning, getting dressed some days. Rita helped, but with the kind of resentment that made me feel like a burden instead of a husband. She'd bring me soup but slam the bowl down on the nightstand. She'd help me to the bathroom but sigh loudly about having to stop what she was doing. This isn't what I signed up for, she said one evening after I'd been sick from the chemo and needed help cleaning up. In sickness and in health, I reminded her, that's what we promised each other. That was 43 years ago. I was a different person then, a different person. The Rita who had dreamed about our house, who had sewn curtains and planted flowers, who had made mortgage payments feel like investments in our shared future, that person was gone. In her place was a woman who saw my illness as an inconvenience and my needs as impositions. 3 months into treatment, I found the papers. I was looking for our insurance information in Rita's desk drawer when I found the consultation notes from a divorce lawyer. Grounds for divorce: irreconcilable differences and financial incompatibility. Subdivision: wife entitled to 50% of marital property, including house. Spousal support: unlikely given husband's inability to work and medical expenses. She'd been planning this. While I was fighting for my life, she was figuring out how to escape from our marriage. Rita, what is this? I asked when she came home from work, holding the papers in my shaking hands. It's reality, Brad. I can't do this anymore. Can't do what? Can't be married to me? Can't help me through the worst time of my life? I can't spend the rest of my life taking care of a sick old man. I can't watch our savings disappear on medical bills. I can't pretend that this is the life I want anymore. This is the life we built together. This is our house, our marriage, our commitment to each other. This is your house, Brad. Your house that I've been trapped in for 20 years. In a neighborhood I never wanted to stay in, with a man who never wanted anything more than mediocrity. The words came out like they'd been waiting behind her teeth for years, sharp and cutting and designed to hurt in ways that went deeper than cancer. Trapped? Rita, we chose this house together. We planned our life together. Everything I did was for us. Everything you did was for you. You wanted a house you could afford, a neighborhood where you felt comfortable, a life that didn't require you to grow or change or want anything more than what you already had. I wanted a life where we were secure, where we owned something, where we built wealth instead of just spending money. And I wanted a life where I could be proud of where I lived and how I lived, where I didn't have to make excuses for my husband's lack of ambition or my house's lack of style. That's when I understood. Rita hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She'd been ashamed of me for years. Ashamed of my job, ashamed of our house, ashamed of the life I'd worked so hard to provide for her. So you're going to divorce me while I'm fighting cancer? I'm going to divorce you because life is short and I don't want to spend what's left of mine being a caregiver to someone who never gave me what I really wanted. What did you really want, Rita? What could I have done different? You could have been ambitious. You could have wanted more than just paying bills and maintaining a house. You could have been the kind of man who builds empires instead of just getting by. Empires. After 43 years of marriage, she wanted empires. 2 weeks later, I was served with divorce papers in my hospital bed during a chemotherapy session. The nurse looked embarrassed as she handed me the legal documents, and I felt humiliated in ways that had nothing to do with cancer and everything to do with being abandoned by the person who was supposed to love me most. But the real betrayal came when I read the details of what Rita was asking for. She wanted half of everything, including the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 20 years. The house she now claimed she'd always hated. The house that was my only security, my only asset, my only hope for a place to live while I fought for my life. Your wife is seeking immediate occupancy of the marital residence, my lawyer James Thompson explained when I called him from the hospital. She's claiming that you're unable to maintain the property due to your illness. Unable to maintain it? I built that house into what it is with my own hands. Every improvement, every repair, every payment, that was me. Unfortunately, under Alabama law, both spouses have equal claim to marital property regardless of who paid for it. And given your current health situation, the court might view her request sympathetically. So she can just kick me out of my own house? It's not your house legally, Mr. Prince. It's the marital home, and she has as much right to it as you do, maybe more, given that she's claiming you're unable to care for yourself or the property. Unable to care for myself. The woman who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health was now using my sickness as evidence that I didn't deserve to keep my home. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in December. I was between chemo cycles, feeling weak, but determined to fight for the only security I had left. Rita showed up with her lawyer, looking healthy and put together, while I sat at the defendant's table, trying not to shake from the medication side effect. Your Honor, Rita's lawyer began, my client has been the primary caretaker of the marital residence for over 20 years. She's maintained the interior, coordinated all improvements, and ensured that the property values were preserved. Mr. Prince's illness has made it impossible for him to continue contributing to the household maintenance, and my client fears that the property will deteriorate under his sole care. Primary caretaker, like I hadn't spent every weekend for 20 years fixing, painting, repairing, and improving that house. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, Mr. Prince's medical expenses are creating a financial burden that threatens my client's ability to maintain her standard of living. She's requesting immediate occupancy of the residence and relief from any financial responsibility for Mr. Prince's ongoing medical treatment. Relief from financial responsibility. After 43 years of marriage, she wanted legal protection from my cancer bills. My lawyer did his best to argue that I'd paid the mortgage, made the improvements, and deserved to keep living in my home during my illness. But the judge was more concerned with Rita's rights as a spouse than with my contributions as a homeowner. Mrs. Prince has an equal claim to the marital residence, the judge ruled. However, given Mr. Prince's illness and need for stability during treatment, I'm ordering that the property be sold and the proceeds divided equally between both parties. Mr. Prince will have 60 days to vacate the premises. 60 days. I had 60 days to find somewhere else to live while fighting cancer and losing the only home I'd ever owned. But Rita had other plans. She didn't want to wait for a sale. She wanted me out immediately. Brad, I found a buyer for the house, she told me that evening when I came home from my radiation treatment. My cousin Marcus made an offer and I accepted it. Your cousin? Rita, you can't sell our house to your family without my permission. I can, and I did. The closing is next Friday and Marcus wants to move in immediately. You need to be out by this weekend. This weekend? Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You got family, you got friends. Figure it out. That's when I realized the depth of her betrayal. She hadn't just planned to divorce me. She'd planned to make sure I had nowhere to go, no way to fight back, no choice but to accept whatever scraps she was willing to throw my way. Rita, I'm sick. I'm getting treatment. You can't just throw me out on the street. I'm not throwing you out on the street. I'm exercising my legal rights as a co-owner of this property. You'll get your half of the sale price, minus the realtor fees and the remaining mortgage balance. The sale price she had negotiated with her cousin was $30,000 below market value. After the fees and mortgage payoff, I'd be lucky to get $15,000. Not enough to buy another house, barely enough to rent an apartment for a year while I finished cancer treatment. Selling our house for less than it's worth to your own family, and you're keeping me from getting fair market value. I'm getting what I can get quickly. If you wanted to maximize the value, you should have taken better care of the property over the years. 20 years of mortgage payments, home improvements and maintenance, and she was acting like I'd neglected the place. That Friday, I stood in the driveway watching a locksmith change the locks on the house I'd called home for 20 years. Rita supervised from the front porch, making sure I didn't take anything she considered hers, which turned out to be almost everything. You can take your clothes, your personal items, and that old toolbox from the garage, she told me, as I tried to figure out what 43 years of marriage had left me with. What about the furniture we bought together, the dishes, the appliances? Both stay with the house. Marcus is buying it furnished. So I packed 2 garbage bags with clothes, took my father's old toolbox, and walked away from the only home I'd ever owned. Rita watched from the window as I loaded my life into the back of my pickup truck, her face showing no emotion, no regret, no acknowledgement of what she was taking from me. As I drove away from 1247 Pine Valley Drive for the last time, I looked in the rearview mirror at the house where I'd planned to grow old with the woman I loved. The house where I'd painted every room, fixed every broken thing, made every mortgage payment on time for 20 years. The house that had never really been mine at all. Let me tell you something about being 65 years old, sick with cancer and homeless. It's a special kind of hell that strips away every illusion you ever had about fairness, justice, or the reliability of the people who claim to love you. I spent that first night in my truck in the parking lot of a 24-hour Walmart, too proud to call my family and too sick to figure out a better plan. The December cold cut through my jacket like my bones were made of ice, and every time I tried to sleep, the nausea from the radiation would wake me up. Around 3 a.m., security knocked on my window. "Sir, you can't sleep here. Store policy." "Understand. I'll move along." "You got somewhere to go?" I looked at this young security guard. Couldn't have been more than 25, probably making minimum wage. But he had the decency to ask if I had options. "Working on it," I lied. "There's a shelter about 10 miles east on Highway 31. They take folks in overnight, no questions asked." A shelter. At 65 years old, after working my entire adult life, I was getting directions to a homeless shelter. Appreciate the information. I drove to the Salvation Army shelter and sat in the parking lot until they opened at 7 a.m. The line of men waiting to get in looked like a catalog of life's failures. Some young guys who'd probably never had steady jobs. Some middle-aged men who'd lost everything to addiction or divorce. Some old-timers like me who'd been betrayed by circumstances they couldn't control. "First time?" asked the man standing behind me in line. He was maybe 60, wearing a coat that had seen better decades, but his eyes were kind. "Yeah, first time. It ain't so bad. Food's decent, beds are clean, and you don't ask too many questions. What brought you here, if you don't mind me asking?" "Cancer, divorce, lost my house yesterday." He whistled low. "Damn, brother. When it rains, it pours, don't it?" His name was Charlie Williams, and he'd been homeless for 3 years since his disability check stopped coming, and he couldn't afford rent anymore. Used to be a mechanic, worked 40 years for the same shop until his hands got too shaky to hold tools steady. "The thing about being homeless," he told me as we waited for the doors to open, "is that it shows you who you really are underneath all this stuff you thought defined you. House, job, wife, strip all that away and what's left is just you. Some men find out they're stronger than they thought. Some find out they're weaker. Which one you gonna be?" Which one was I gonna be? I didn't know yet, but I was about to find out. The shelter was better than I'd expected and worse than I'd hoped. Clean but institutional, safe but humiliating. The bed was a narrow cot in a room with 20 other men, and the lights went out at 10 p.m. whether you were tired or not. But it was warm, and it was a hot meal, and nobody looked at me like I was less than human just because I didn't have an address. "What you gonna do next?" Charlie asked me during dinner that first night. "Finish my cancer treatment, try to find a place to live, figure out how to rebuild my life at 65. "You got any money?" "Some, not much. My ex-wife sold our house quick and cheap. I'll get maybe $15,000 when all the papers are signed." "That ain't much, but it's more than most folks here got. You could rent a little apartment, maybe find a part-time job once you're feeling better." A part-time job at 65. After working full-time for 47 years, I was looking at part-time work to pay for a studio apartment and hope I didn't outlive my money. That night, lying on a cot surrounded by the sounds of men who'd lost everything, I cried for the first time since my daddy died. Cried for the house I loved, the marriage I believed in, the future I planned that would never happen. But crying don't pay rent or cure cancer. So the next morning, I started making phone calls. "Brad?" My sister Diane's voice was shocked when I called her from the shelter's payphone. "Where are you? Rita said you'd moved out, but she didn't say where." "I'm at the Salvation Army shelter downtown. Rita threw me out, sold the house to her cousin for less than it was worth. I got nowhere else to go right now." "The shelter? Oh my God, Brad, why didn't you call me? You know you can stay with me and Carl." Diane and her husband lived in a little 2-bedroom house in Tuscaloosa, barely big enough for the two of them. The thought of imposing on their space and their marriage made me feel even smaller than I already did. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You're my brother. Pack up whatever you got and come here. We'll figure out the rest later." The kindness in her voice broke something open in my chest that I'd been holding closed since Rita handed me those garbage bags. I spent 6 weeks with Diane and Carl, sleeping on their living room couch while I finished radiation treatments and tried to figure out what came next. They were good to me, better than I deserved after spending so many years focused on my own marriage that I barely maintained relationships with my siblings. You remember when Daddy used to say that family was the only thing you could count on when everything else fell apart? Diane asked one evening while we sat on her back porch, watching the sun set over her neighbor's cornfield. I remember, he was right. Rita might have thrown you away, but you still got family. You still got people who love for who you are, not what you can provide. I feel like such a failure, Diane. 65 years old and homeless. Married for 43 years to a woman who couldn't wait to get rid of me the minute I got sick. You're not a failure. You're a good man who got dealt a bad hand. But you're still breathing. You're still fighting. And the doctors say the cancer treatment is working. That don't sound like failure to me. The doctors were right. The treatment was working. My latest scans showed that the tumors were shrinking and my PSA levels were dropping toward normal. I was going to beat the cancer that Rita had seen as a death sentence. But beating cancer was only half the battle. I still needed somewhere to live, somewhere to support myself, some reason to believe that life at 66 could be worth living. That's when my brother Robert called with an offer I never saw coming. Brad, you remember my buddy Wayne Peterson? Used to own that auto repair shop over on Southside? Yeah, I remember Wayne. He's getting ready to retire and he's looking for someone to take over the business, not buy it. He wants to give it to someone who'll treat his customers right and keep his employees working. You interested? An auto repair shop. I've been fixing cars as a hobby for 40 years, but I never thought about making it my living. Robert, I'm 65 years old and just finished cancer treatment. You think I can run a business at my age? I think you can do anything you set your mind to, and I think Wayne's customers would trust a man with your experience and integrity more than some young kid who's just trying to make a quick buck. What would it cost me? Just promise to keep the business going and take care of the guys who work there. Wayne's more interested in legacy than money. Legacies. At 66, I was being offered a chance to build something again, to have a purpose beyond just surviving. I met with Wayne Peterson the following week. He was 82 years old, had been running Peterson's auto repair for 43 years, and was ready to pass it on to someone who understood that fixing cars was about more than just making money. I've been watching how you work on your own vehicles over the years, he told me as we walked through his shop. You take your time, you do things right, you don't cut corners. That's what this business needs, someone who cares more about quality than quick profits. Wayne, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have money to buy a business. Who said anything about buying? I'm giving it to you. Equipment, customer list, lease on the building, everything. Only condition is that you keep my 3 employees and treat them fair. Why would you do that for me? Because I've been where you are. Lost everything once to a woman who decided she deserved better than what I could provide. Difference is I was 45 and had time to rebuild. You're 66 and don't have time to waste on feeling sorry for yourself. You think I could make it work? I think you better make it work, because at our age, this might be your last chance to build something that matters. He was right. This was my last chance to build something that mattered, to create a legacy that couldn't be taken away by divorce papers or medical bills or the cruelty of people who were supposed to love you. I shook Wayne Peterson's hand that day and became the owner of a business I'd never dreamed of having. It wasn't much, 3 service bays, a small office, and a customer base of working folks who needed honest mechanics they could trust, but it was mine in ways that the house on Pine Valley Drive had never really been mine. Congratulations, boss, said Tommy Martinez, the head mechanic who'd been working for Wayne for 15 years. We've been hoping you'd say yes. Why is that? Because Wayne told us about your situation, and we figure any man who can survive what you've been through and still want to work is the kind of boss we can respect. Respect. After months of feeling like a burden, a failure, a man whose own wife couldn't wait to be rid of him, Here were three strangers offering me respect based on nothing more than my willingness to show up and try again. I started talking to my tools again. At least they listened. Started having conversations with my father's ghost, asking him if he was proud of his son for not giving up when giving up would have been easier. But mostly, I started believing that maybe Charlie Williams was right. Maybe losing everything shows you who you really are underneath all the stuff you thought defined you. Maybe I was stronger than I thought. I was about to find out. Running Peterson's Auto Repair, now Blake's Auto Repair, taught me something I'd never learned in 47 years of working for other people. There's a different kind of satisfaction that comes from building something with your own hands, your own vision, your own reputation. This shop was small, but it was honest. We fixed what needed fixing, charged fair prices, and treated every customer like they mattered. Word got around the neighborhood that the new owner was a man you could trust with your car and your money. Mr. Blake said Mrs. Patterson, a widow who brought her 1998 Buick in for oil changes, "You remind me of my late husband. He used to say that a man's character shows in how he treats people who can't do anything for him." Your husband sounds like he was a wise man. He was, and he would have liked you. You got the same honest eyes. Honest eyes? After Rita had made me feel like a man who'd never been enough, here was a customer telling me I had honest eyes. Business grew slowly but steadily. Working folks appreciated that I didn't try to sell them services they didn't need or repairs they couldn't afford. I'd show them exactly what was wrong with their vehicles, explain their options, and let them decide how much they wanted to spend. "You could make a lot more money if you pushed the expensive repairs," Tommy told me one afternoon as we closed up shop. I could, but then I'd have to look at myself in the mirror every night, knowing I'd take advantage of people who trusted me. My daddy always said that sleep comes easier when your conscience is clear. Your daddy sounds like he was a good man. He was. Taught me that being poor don't excuse being dishonest, and being successful don't excuse being cruel. The shop gave me purpose, but it didn't give me peace. I was still angry. Angry at Rita for throwing me away. Angry at the legal system that had let her take half of everything I'd worked for. Angry at myself for not seeing the betrayal coming. Charlie Williams, who'd become a regular visitor to the shop, could see the anger eating at me. "You still carrying that poison around?" he asked one evening as I locked up. "What poison?" "The poison of hating somebody who ain't worth the energy. Rita's moved on, living her life, probably don't think about you except when she has to sign papers, but you're spending every day angry at her. And that anger ain't hurting her, it's hurting you. She threw me out while I was sick with cancer. She sold our house for less than it was worth to her own family. How am I supposed to just forgive that?" You don't forgive her for her sake, you forgive her for yours. Because carrying hate around is like carrying a hot coal in your pocket. It don't burn the person you're mad at, it burns you. Forgiveness. The word felt foreign, impossible, like something other people might be capable of, but not me. But Charlie was right about the poison. Every time I thought about Rita living in her new house while I slept on my sister's couch, every time I remembered her standing on the porch watching me pack my life into garbage bags, every time I calculated how much money she'd cost me with her quick sale to her cousin, all of that anger was eating away at whatever peace I might have found in my new life. The turning point came 6 months after I took over the shop. I was working late on a transmission repair when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I saw Rita getting out of a new Honda Accord, looking around nervously like she wasn't sure she should be there. She knocked on the shop door, and for a moment, I considered pretending I hadn't heard her. But 43 years of marriage, even a marriage that ended badly, deserve at least the courtesy of a conversation. "Rita, what you doing here? I heard you had your own shop now. I'll just stop by and see how you were doing." She looked good. Healthy, well-dressed, like a woman who'd made the right decision in leaving a sick husband and moving on with her life. "I'm doing fine. Cancer's in remission, business is growing, and I got a place of my own now." It was true. I'd finally saved enough to rent a small apartment near the shop. "I'm glad to hear that I was worried about you." Worried about me. The woman who'd thrown me out while I was fighting for my life was worried about me. What you really want, Rita? She was quiet for a long moment, looking around the shop like she was trying to figure out how to say whatever she'd come to say. I want to apologize. For what? For how I handled things when you got sick. For selling the house so quick. For not being the wife you needed when you needed me most. An apology. After all the anger, all the hurt, all the nights lying awake, wondering how someone could be so cruel to a person they'd once promised to love, she was apologizing. Why now? What changed? I got diagnosed with diabetes last month. Type 2, but it's going to require medication and lifestyle changes and regular doctor visits. And I realized that someday I might be the sick one. And if someone treated me the way I treated you, she was crying now. And for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 45 years ago, vulnerable, scared, human, in ways that had nothing to do with money or status or the size of her house. I was selfish, Brad. I was scared of being poor, scared of being tied down to someone who couldn't take care of himself, scared of watching our savings disappear on medical bills. I convinced myself that I was protecting my future, but really, I was just being a coward. You are being honest about who you are, I said, the words coming out without the anger I'd expected to feel. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's better to know the truth about someone than to keep believing a lie. Do you hate me? I thought about that question, really thought about it, for the first time since she'd handed me those garbage bags. No, I don't hate you. I'm disappointed in you and I'm hurt by what you did, but I don't hate you. Can you forgive me? I can forgive you for my own peace of mind, but I can't forget what you showed me about who you really are when things got hard. She nodded like she understood the difference. Are you happy? She asked. I'm getting there. This shop, the customers who trust me, the satisfaction of building something that matters. It's not the life I planned, but it's a good life. What about the house? Do you miss it? I miss the idea of it. I miss believing that we were building something together that would last. But the house itself, it was just a building, Rita. It was never really home if it could be taken away so easy. She left after that, and I never saw her again. But something shifted in me during that conversation, some weight I'd been carrying around without realizing it. Charlie was right. Forgiveness wasn't about Rita. It was about me choosing not to let her betrayal define the rest of my life. The shop continued to grow. Within 2 years, I'd hired 2 more mechanics and expanded into a second bay. Customers brought their friends, their family members, their neighbors who needed honest car repair at fair prices. Mr. Blake, said James Washington, a young father who brought his wife's minivan in for brake work. My daddy always told me to find a mechanic I could trust and stick with him. You're that mechanic for my family. I appreciate that, son. Your daddy sounds like he was a smart man. Oh, he was. He also said that real men take care of people, especially people who can't take care of themselves. That's what you do here. Real men take care of people. That's what I tried to do for Rita for 43 years, but she's seen it as limitation instead of love. These customers saw it as character. On my 70th birthday, the guys at the shop threw me a little party. Nothing fancy, just cake from the grocery store and some good-natured ribbing about being old enough to remember when cars had carburetors. Boss, said Tommy, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast, here's to a man who proved that it's never too late to start over and build something good. Here's to second chances, added Miguel, the youngest mechanic, who just turned 25. Here's to not giving up when everything goes wrong, said Eddie, who'd been divorced twice and understood something about rebuilding your life from scratch. Second chances. At 70, I'd gotten a second chance to build something that mattered, to be the kind of man my father had raised me to be, to prove that losing everything doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. The financial vindication came later, almost as an afterthought. I'd always suspected that Rita had sold our house to her cousin for less than market value as a way to keep me from getting my fair share of the proceeds. But I'd been too sick and too overwhelmed to fight it at the time. 3 years after the divorce, I hired a real estate appraiser to look at what our house had sold for compared to other houses in the neighborhood during the same time period. The evidence was clear. Rita had cost me at least $40,000 by selling to her cousin instead of putting the house on the open market. You could sue her for fraud, my lawyer told me when I showed him the appraisal. The evidence is pretty compelling that she deliberately undervalued the property to keep you from getting your fair share. What would that cost me? Legal fees would probably run about $10,000, maybe $15,000 if she fights it hard. And what are the chances of winning? Pretty good, maybe 70-30 in your favor. I thought about it for exactly 5 minutes before deciding not to pursue it. Not because I didn't deserve the money, I did. Not because Rita didn't deserve to be held accountable, she did. But because I'd already won the only victory that mattered. I'd survived cancer. I'd survived homelessness. I'd survived the betrayal of the person who was supposed to love me most. And I'd built something new, something better, something that couldn't be taken away by divorce papers or medical bills or the cruelty of people who were supposed to protect you. Blake's Auto Repair was mine in ways that 1247 Pine Valley Drive had never been mine. It was built with my reputation, my integrity, my commitment to treating people right. It was a legacy that would outlast me, a business that would keep serving the community long after I was gone. That was worth more than $40,000. That was worth everything. You know what losing everything teaches you? It teaches you the difference between what you own and what owns you. For 20 years, I thought I owned that house on Pine Valley Drive. Turns out the house owned me, owned my time, my energy, my sense of identity, my belief that I was building something permanent with someone who loved me. When Rita took the house away, I thought she'd taken everything that mattered. But what really mattered, my skills, my character, my ability to treat people right, she couldn't touch any of that. She could take the building, but she couldn't take the man who'd maintained it. My grandfather's words came back to me during those first months at the shop. You can build a house with your hands, but you build a home with your heart. And sometimes you find out which one you really got. I'd built a house with Rita, but I'd never really had a home. A home is a place where you're loved for who you are, not what you can provide. A home is a place where sickness makes people want to take care of you, not get rid of you. A home is a place where your worth isn't measured by your ability to pay bills and fix things. The shop became my home in ways that the house never was. Not because of the building. It was just a concrete block structured with 3 service bays and an office that smelled like motor oil and coffee. But because of the people who filled it, the customers who trusted me, the employees who respected me, the community that valued what I had to offer. Mr. Blake, said Sarah Johnson, a single mother who brought her old Toyota in for regular maintenance, you saved my life when you fixed my car for cost and let me pay in installments. Most places would have told me to come back when I had the money. Most places don't understand that transportation is the difference between having a job and losing a job, I told her. I've been poor, and I remember what it feels like to need help. That's what makes you different. You remember where you came from. Where I came from a little shotgun house in Ensley where my parents taught me that character mattered more than money, that helping people was more important than helping yourself, that a man's worth was measured by how he treated folks who couldn't do anything for him. Rita had tried to make me forget those lessons, tried to convince me that success meant accumulating things and status instead of building relationships and reputation. For a while, I'd believed her. I'd worked overtime, not because I loved the work, but because I thought earning more money would make her love me more. But money can't buy love, and things can't fill the empty spaces in someone's heart. Rita had been empty in ways that no house, no car, no lifestyle could ever fill. She'd been looking for happiness in external things instead of internal peace. And when my illness threatened her access to those external things, she'd chosen them over me. You can't fill someone else's emptiness, Charlie Williams told me one evening when I was struggling with understanding how Rita could have been so cruel. You can love them. You can provide for them. You can sacrifice everything for them. But if they're empty inside, nothing you do will be enough. How do you know if someone's empty inside? You watch how they treat people who can't do anything for them. You watch what they do when times get hard. You watch whether they're grateful for what they have or always complaining about what they don't have. Rita had never been grateful. For 20 years, she'd focused on what our life lacked instead of what it provided. The house was too small. The neighborhood wasn't nice enough. My job didn't have enough prestige. She'd been living in a state of constant dissatisfaction, always looking for something better instead of appreciating what she had. I'd enabled that dissatisfaction by working harder to give her more instead of asking her to be grateful for what we already had. I'd taught her that her unhappiness was my problem to solve instead of her attitude to adjust. You can't love someone into being happy, Dr. Anderson, my oncologist, told me during one of my follow-up appointments. Happiness is an inside job. Some people choose to be grateful for what they have, and some people choose to be resentful about what they don't have. You can't make that choice for them. But I spent 43 years trying, and those 43 years taught you something valuable about the difference between love and enabling. Real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices instead of protecting them from those consequences. Real love. I'd thought real love meant working myself nearly to death to give Rita everything she wanted, but real love would have meant helping her learn to be content with what we had, helping her find happiness in our life together instead of constantly seeking happiness in things we couldn't afford. The cancer taught me other lessons too. It taught me that your body is just the vehicle that carries your spirit through life. And when the vehicle breaks down, you can either focus on the breakdown or focus on where you're trying to go. How you feeling today, boss? Miguel would ask me on the days when the residual effects of treatment made me move slower than usual. I'm feeling grateful, I'd tell him. Grateful to be alive, grateful to have work that matters, grateful to be surrounded by good people. Is even with everything that happened to you? Especially because of everything that happened to me. I found out I'm stronger than I thought, more resilient than I knew, and capable of building something meaningful even when everything else falls apart. The biggest lesson, though, was about the difference between building wealth and building legacy. For 20 years, I'd focused on building wealth, paying off the mortgage, increasing the value of our house, accumulating assets that could be sold or divided or taken away. But wealth without character is just numbers on paper. Legacy is what people remember about how you treated them, how you conducted your business, how you faced adversity with dignity instead of bitterness. Mr. Blake, said Robert Chen, a customer who'd been coming to the shop for 3 years. My son's graduating high school next month, and he wants to learn auto repair. Would you consider taking him on as an apprentice? Why would you want your son to work here instead of going to college? Because college teaches you how to think, but working for you would teach him how to be a man. My son needs to learn the kind of character I see in you every time I bring my car. Character. That's what I'd really been building all these years without realizing it. Not just wealth or assets or things that could be taken away, but a reputation for integrity that attracted people who valued integrity themselves. The shop became a gathering place for men who understood that honest work and fair dealing were becoming rare in a world that seemed to value quick profits over long-term relationships. Tommy, Miguel, Eddie, and I weren't just co-workers. We were a brotherhood of men who'd chosen to do business the way our fathers and grandfathers had done business. You know what I like about working here? Eddie asked one day as we closed up shop. I like that I can tell my kids exactly what I do for a living and be proud of it. I fix things that are broken. I help people who need help. I work for a man who treats his employees like family and his customers like friends. You know what I like about working here? I responded. I like that every day I get to prove that good men still exist, that honest business still works, that treating people right is still the best way to build something that lasts. If you hear nothing else from me, remember this: you are not defined by what other people take from you. You are defined by what you choose to build after they take it. Rita took my house, but she couldn't take my ability to create a home. She took my savings, but she couldn't take my skills. She took my marriage, but she couldn't take my capacity to love and be loved by people who deserved it. At 70, I'd learned that the best revenge against people who count you out is to build something so good, so solid, so valuable to your community that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Rita could keep her new house and her new life. I had something better: peace of mind, meaningful work, and the respect of people who mattered. The shop was making enough money for me to live comfortably in my small apartment, with enough left over to help customers who were struggling and to give my employees bonuses at Christmas. I wasn't wealthy, but I was rich in ways that Rita would never understand. "Boss," Tommy said one Friday afternoon as we locked up for the weekend, "you know what you taught me about running a business?" "What's that?" "You taught me that if you take care of people, people will take care of you. If you're honest with folks, they'll be loyal to you. If you do good work at fair prices, you'll never lack for customers." "Your daddy never taught you that?" "My daddy taught me to get mine before somebody else got theirs." "You taught me that there's enough for everybody if you're willing to share." There's enough for everybody if you're willing to share. That might be the most important lesson I learned in 70 years of living. Rita had operated from a place of scarcity, always believing that someone else's success meant less success for her. But abundance isn't about having more things. It's about being more generous, more grateful, more willing to help others achieve their dreams. The diagnosis that Rita had seen as a disaster had become the catalyst for the most meaningful years of my life. Cancer had stripped away everything I thought I needed and left me with everything I actually needed: my health, my skills, my character, and my determination to build something that mattered. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a man is losing everything he thought he wanted so he can discover what he actually needs. I'm 70 years old now, sitting in the office of Blake's Auto Repair at the end of another good day, watching the sun set through the window that looks out over the 3 service bays where honest work gets done for fair prices by good men who understand that how you treat people matters more than how much money you make. The shop is quiet now. The last customer picked up his car an hour ago, and the guys have all gone home to their families. But I like this time of day, when the work is done and I can sit here with a cup of coffee and think about how far I've come from that night in the Walmart parking lot when I thought my life was over. Charlie Williams stopped by earlier, like he does most Fridays, to check on me and share whatever wisdom he's picked up during the week. He's got a little apartment now, found work doing maintenance for a church, and somehow managed to rebuild his life at 68. "You know what I figured out about starting over?" he asked me as we sat in the office sharing coffee and watching Tommy work on a transmission. "Figure out that you don't actually start over, you start forward. All the experience, all the knowledge, all the character you built during the first part of your life, that comes with you. You don't lose that just because you lose your house or your wife or your job. Start forward." I like that better than start over because it acknowledges that the 65 years I'd lived before the shop weren't wasted, even though they'd led to heartbreak and betrayal and standing on a sidewalk with garbage bags. Those 65 years had taught me how to work with my hands, how to treat people with respect, how to be reliable and honest and generous. Those qualities had made Blake's Auto Repair successful in ways that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with building relationships with people who valued integrity. "Mr. Blake," said David Martinez, Tommy's 19-year-old son, who started working part-time at the shop while he studied automotive technology at the community college. "My dad says you're the best boss he's ever had. What makes a good boss?" "Same thing that makes a good man," I told him. You show up every day, you do what you say you're going to do, you treat people fair, you help when you can, and you never ask anybody to do something you wouldn't do yourself. That's it. That's it. Complicated situations require simple principles. You stick to the simple principles, and the complicated situations work themselves out. Simple principles. My grandfather had understood that. My father had lived by that. For most of my life, I'd complicated things by trying to make other people happy instead of focusing on being the kind of man who deserved happiness. Rita had been unhappy because she'd chosen to be unhappy, not because I failed to provide enough money or status or material comfort. I'd spent 43 years trying to solve a problem that was never mine to solve. But the customers at Blake's Auto Repair were happy because they'd chosen to value honest work and fair dealing over flashy advertising and quick fixes. They'd chosen to build relationships with people they could trust instead of chasing the lowest price from people they'd never see again. You know what I'm proudest of? I asked David as we finished cleaning up for the day. What's that? I'm proud that when people mention my name, they smile. When they tell their friends about Blake's Auto Repair, they're recommending a place they trust. When they have car trouble, they call me first because they know I'll take care of them. That's a good reputation to have. It's the only reputation worth having. Everything else is just noise. Last week, I got a letter from a lawyer handling Rita's estate. She died in her sleep of a heart attack, alone in the big house she bought with the money from selling our home. The letter says she left me $5,000 in a note. The note was short. Brad, I'm sorry for how I treated you when you were sick. You deserve better than what I gave you. I hope you found the happiness that I could never seem to find. You were a good husband, and I was a selfish wife. Please forgive me. I felt sad for her, not because she was gone, but because she'd spent the last years of her life realizing that the things she'd chosen over love hadn't brought her the satisfaction she'd been looking for. Money, status, independence, none of it had filled the emptiness that had made her incapable of appreciating what we'd had together. I used the $5,000 she left me to start a scholarship fund at the community college for students studying automotive technology, kids like David Martinez who wanted to learn honest work and build good careers with their hands. Why automotive technology? Asked the dean when I set up the fund. Because working with your hands teaches you that problems have solutions, that broken things can be fixed, that honest effort produces tangible results. Those are lessons that serve a person well no matter what they end up doing with their life. The scholarship is called the Rita Washington Memorial Fund for Automotive Technology, not because she deserved to be honored, but because she deserved to be forgiven. And because forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did to you, it's about choosing not to let what they did to you define who you become. Tonight, like every night, I'll drive home to my small apartment, heat up something simple for dinner, and watch the news while I plan tomorrow's work. It's not the life I planned when I was 22 and in love with a beautiful woman who wanted to build a house together. But it's a good life. It's a life built on simple principles and honest work and relationships with people who value the same things I value. It's a life where my reputation matters more than my net worth, where my character matters more than my possessions, where my legacy matters more than my accumulation. If this story hit home, share your own experience in the comments. Tell us about your own second chance, your own opportunity to start forward instead of start over. Don't forget to subscribe and tell a brother who needs to hear he's not alone. Sometimes life takes everything away from you to show you what really matters. Sometimes the house you lose was never really home. Sometimes the person who leaves you does you the biggest favor of your life by showing you who they really were before you wasted any more time trying to make them happy. This is His Stories, where men rise above together and where we learn that it's never too late to build something good, something lasting, something that can't be taken away by divorce papers or medical bills or the cruelty of people who never deserved your love in the first place. Your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. Your value isn't measured by what you own or where you live or how much money you make. where your legacy is determined by how you treat people when you have power over them, how you respond when life knocks you down, and what you choose to build when everything else falls apart. At 70, I'm building the best legacy of my life. One honest repair job, one fair price, one satisfied customer at a time. And brothers, that's worth more than any house I thought I owned. If this story resonated with you, I want you to like this video. Drop your comments below. I'd be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also, don't forget to share this video with a brother who needs it. Until next time, stay strong, brothers.